Welcome to the Unraveling Shaltazar podcast. Hello, Jeffrey. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Mark, and how are you?
Not bad. Not bad. Better than yesterday. So
Right. And when I answered, I probably answered incorrectly because as we both been chatting before we started this recording, something's going on in the energy field that is creating a little bit of turmoil, discomfort, and I would just like to say to the listeners that no matter how long you've been on the journey, because you have been for a long time and I have been for a long time, there is no immunity like hopefully we're going to get from the COVID vaccine from these little puddles and muddles and bumps in the road and twists and turns. So it's really important for people to realize that you never get to that point where you're immune from some of the lessons that the universe wants to send our way.
Right. Yeah. They come whether you like it or not, and it's up to us to respond in the best way that we can, given the tools that we've got wherever we happen to be standing, right?
Right. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that the ability to glean, to get the learning and growth when you're going through the discomfort and the displeasure is minimized. So don't beat yourself up. It was interesting, you and I chatting with each other kind of helped each other, but when you're going through it, as I like to call it, the tunnel of darkness, when you're in the midst of the tunnel of darkness, do not expect those lessons to come at you in a clear way. You pretty well have to wait for the fog to clear before you can understand a little bit better what you've been set up to learn. Yeah.
I think one of the things I'm learning is patience, because when you recognize that something's out of whack and you feel disconnected, from source or divinity, rather than panicking, I think the one of the lessons to be learned is to just kind of to take a breath and just sit with it and be okay with it until the dust settles a little bit.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's interesting that that's sort of a segue into the message that I believe you have chosen for today. Because that message does talk about, our ability to connect in a stronger way. And so, just a watch out for people, just because the veil might be thinning, just because our ability to connect is easier most of the time, don't expect that to be all of the time.
Right. So let's jump in. Let's jump into the message that I chose for today. This one's called "The Opportunity for a New Humanity," and it's really kind of a fascinating message because it's got three kind of different focuses in it. It's a very short message. I don't know. I printed it out. It's a page and a third, perhaps, But it's perhaps one of the more personal Shaltazar messages, because it's at least it struck me that way because of the kind of the three things that they kind of incorporated in here, and I kind of wanted to talk about all of them. But the first thing it talks about is listening to the younger ones, which has been something that's been very front and center in my life lately. It also talks about this idea of the energy of change and our choice to either continue the status quo or to allow the less is more paradigm to start taking over, and then It also goes into them talking about the duality a bit and why we're here and why we're experiencing things the way we're experiencing it. So it kind of had, to me, it had three kind of little key elements that were filling in blanks in my understanding of things that I thought may help others and would be good for you to shed some light on for us.
Yeah, thank you for choosing it. It's interesting because you said it's a page and a third, and when I went to listen to it on Insight Timer, it was 5 minutes and 55 seconds, which, of course, being a numerology fan, 555 is certainly a very strong change number, which was interesting. It was a bit of a shock to me because I don't always recognize them by their title, and that one sounded kind of interesting. And I don't know if you noticed, but it was very different. It was very different. It didn't seem to start out the same way. It didn't end the same way. There was a certain brevity in it, and usually ends up by saying, "We bring you this message from a place of love," and this one just sort of ended very abruptly. And at first I was a bit uncomfortable with it, and I had to listen to it twice. But you're really right. It brought up some things in a way that they tend not to bring them up. One of them, of course, is listen to the young ones. And coincidentally, I had a coaching session. One of my clients asked me to speak to her 14-year-old daughter, and it's sort of like, that's not really my forte. But she's a very creative young lady, and I had this 1 hour discovery session, and it was fascinating because my kids are all grown up and my grandkids aren't quite 14 yet. And so having this conversation with a young one, and seeing the potential that Shaltazar was talking about, which was very interesting, yet shrouded in the conditioned beliefs, and it was kind of interesting because I tried to reconcile what that message is saying. Listen to the young ones, but yet this young lady was sort of. You could feel the conditioned beliefs overshadowing that energy and that understanding that Shaltazar was saying that the young ones came forward with, and it's sort of interesting. And you've got 2 daughters that are relatively young, and I'm sure they aggravate you sometimes, and they push your buttons.
Never.
Oh, sorry. I guess I guessed that one wrong. I don't want to embarrass you here on. So obviously there's something wrong if your young daughters aren't pushing your buttons. But right. I think Shaltazar is saying, because if you take what they're saying very literally, you kind of think that there's these enlightened young people coming forth that are going to speak like gurus. And I don't think that's what they meant. I really don't think that's what they meant. I think that you have to listen to them aggravate us. I think you have to listen to them trigger us. I think you have to listen to what they're saying, because if they're bringing forth this change, they're not doing it as enlightened gurus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, it does. That piece of this message answered a lot of questions actually for me, because I do have the one is not a teenager anymore. She's now 21, but I do have a 17-year-old going on 18. And so a couple interesting things here. One of the lines in here, it says, give a voice to the young ones. They must be allowed to speak and be heard. And, lo and behold, we have this technology now that is their sole means of communication. It used to be texting, but now it's Instagram, and I don't even know what all the things are that they use. But
TikTok's a big one.
TikTok, right? Yeah, they make videos. So there's this whole system of communication that they use that none of the rest of us do, really. I mean, there are some parents who I suppose probably use it to keep tabs or whatever, but they are speaking and they are being heard by each other. and it's just one step. They're one step away from being able to expand that communication to the rest of the world, which I think is interesting. It also, what you said was interesting. That it's not they aren't gurus. In this message somewhere, it talked about that Shaltazar even said we're sending them back here with a tweak to their DNA, so they're different than you are, and we've always had that generation gap, right? As the older generation always looks at the younger generation and goes, they're screwy. What's wrong with them? With us, it was our rock music was the voice of the devil. Now we've got these kids who are very technologically inclined, and we've labeled them, like there's Generation X, Generation Y, Generation whatever, and from where we stand, we look at some of these kids that seem, very unmotivated and very uninterested in becoming part of our established culture, and we criticize them and we say, what's wrong with them? They have to have realistic goals. They have to get jobs. They have to, and they're not buying houses. They're not doing all these traditional things that we kind of equated with the proper way to live a life. And when I read this, I was like, well, that's why. They're not supposed to be. They're different. They're not going to be working our old energy. They're bringing something new to the table that is the next evolution and where all this is going, I guess.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Yes, I agree 100%. And as you're talking, one thing that came to mind is I remember that, when I was growing up, a generation was 20 years. And I think if you look at the young ones, you'll see that there are major changes in periods far less than 20 years. Now, you and I have talked about how time is speeding up. So is a generation 5 or 10 years now? I don't know, maybe. And it's kind of interesting, how you point out that Shaltazar says that their DNA has been tweaked to be a little bit different. I think that leads into that second point, which again blew me away, that less is more. And I've heard that before. Dr. Brian Weiss talked about a major portion of the population being thinned out. We went through COVID. There's a lot of deaths. A lot of businesses are failing. It's kind of interesting. Is COVID part of this less is more prediction that they're talking about? Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if you felt this, but I've certainly felt a push to minimalism, and I've been seeing a lot of meditations on Insight Timer that talk about in conversations about minimalism, and people, it's kind of become a topic. And I hear about people saying, "Oh, we're downsizing. I'm getting rid of all my stuff." My daughter's, she had a closet full of clothes, the one that's in college, and she's selling it on Etsy or some Curtsy or some place where girls sell clothes, and it seems like there's this movement toward less is more. People are, COVID has kind of taught us that, we don't need offices. We don't need, big spaces to get, it's like this whole worldwide shift is kind of pointing us to, well, it says in the message here, that we have this choice of going, of either continuing in the old pattern or adopting this new pattern. And the old pattern is keeping to the status quo, moving in the direction we've been moving for many eons, a slow evolution of doing more, consuming more, pushing more, always more, more, more. On the other path is less of everything, less of everything we've been used to, which is certainly, the outcome of COVID. Less people, less consumption, less pushing, less. And that seems to be the new vibration that's starting to kind of overcome the old energy, I guess, if I had to put a label on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Shaltazar would be a fan of less thoughts as well, right? So not only less materialism, but less less busyness. I know my kids and grandkids have really had a difficult time because COVID has taken away the activity and the busyness. And so you sort of see that, although this message, I'm not sure when it was dated, it was certainly pre-COVID, COVID is sort of the manifestation of us being urged or nudged towards this less is more. So that one's a kind of an interesting one. One of the things that hit me about this message, it was short, but it was like bam, bam, bam. It was like lecturing,
right?
Which is a different tone that I'm used to. It was very much as close as sort of finger pointing as I have got to in channeling Shaltazar. Is that, like you said, there's like 1, 2, 3 points. It's like boom, boom, boom. They're getting in, they're getting out. They're telling them to us, and then they're leaving us. They're not sugarcoating it. They're not cradling us in it. It's just these interesting insights that are packaged in a different way that I've been used to channeling Shaltazar.
Yeah. I think that's what I noticed when I was saying that it had a different feeling to it, because it was almost like, sit down, listen. Point 1, 2, 3, 4. It was just right to the point, very direct, not sugar coated, not really, really very mystical, very matter of fact, on point, and kind of had advice too. Like I want to say at the end, there was a couple things that I noticed that it was like, okay, here, this is what you need to do, and here's what's going on. It didn't leave a lot up to interpretation. It was very, very pointed.
Yeah, which is interesting, because as I listened to it a couple of times this morning, it was like, what popped into my mind is, gee, was I in a grumpy mood when I channeled that? but I don't think so. I really, I don't think I was, but their energy was a little bit different. I think another one of the insights that stood out for me was this connection to the divinity, and how they said that there were, our ancestors did not have the access to behind the veil that we do. And I think back in time, the masters, there didn't seem to be a lot of them. They were profound. They were extremely profound, but there seemed to be the elite few. And I think that was sort of, based on how religion evolved, that it was the high priest, it was the head rabbi, the whatever, that there was an elitist group that had access to this divinity. And this message is basically saying that has been turned around, and that now the greater population has availability to connect. And that's kind of interesting because, on Insight Timer and wherever I can, I teach people how to connect to their intuition. And I find it's really amazing how many people can connect fairly easily. And I'm noticing all kinds of people that are tapping into their intuition, whereas, maybe when I started my journey 18 years ago, that wasn't as much the case. So I think that's another important part of that message, is that they are saying that the veil is thin, that our ability to tap in is stronger. And I love that line. It sort of says that you've got the text in front of you where it's us having more access to us. It was like, when you listen to it, it was confusing as hell, but they're basically saying that since we are implanted in you, it is us giving more access to us.
Let me see if I can find that real quick. Let's see. That was one of the things that struck me about this message, is that they kind of admitted to a more active and proactive role in the evolution of humanity than I've ever known them to do before. They're basically saying, well, yeah, this is, and I used to joke about this with my friends. I used to tell people that that humanity is a faltered or a failed biological experiment. And they're basically saying, yeah, you are an experiment, and we're manipulating the experiment. We put you here. We divorced you or separated you from divinity to see what would happen, like rats in a maze. And we let that go on for a while, and we kind of have collected the information that we want to collect, and now we're letting you have a little bit of divinity back. We're letting you reconnect to it, and we're going to see what that looks like now. And it's like, oh, okay, so this is kind of a shell game that we're the marble, I guess.
No, it's fascinating. I really got that out of it, which was really neat, because they use the word experiment, and at one point, I'm not sure whether it was me apologizing for the word experiment, or they were saying it was a bit harsh. It was like maybe I wanted to soften it, because they used the word experiment, I think, twice in the message. But then they sort of say that experiment is for them, which again was another twist, right? It's not. It's like, yes, we're the pawns, but we're part of the pawns, right? And it's sort of like, right. It's not you out there. It's not Mark. It's not Jeffrey. It's divinity working through us, and we're just the costume, right? Mark's the costume. Jeffrey's the costume. But this game is for us, and we've decided to give us more access to us to see what it would be like for us to have more access to ourselves. And it was like, whoa, what the hell are they talking about?
Yeah. Well, it says we simply, so this is the kind of the game part of it. We simply wish to observe what will occur on your planet when greater access to divinity is given. Okay, so and then the part you're talking about, it says, of course, those playing out the roles of humans are simply us. We are simply allowing us to have more access to us, or who we truly are. So. I don't know how you interpreted that, but kind of the way I interpreted that, you've talked before about, I may be using the wrong words, but the idea of a twin flame, or that, that your soul is bifurcated, and part of you come here and inhabit this human body and live out this lifetime, and while the other part of you remains behind on the other side of the veil and kind of watches and helps or whatever. I don't get how. No, you got it.
But, no, I hear you. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
But maybe that's what that means. Maybe Shaltazar is, Jeffrey part 2 and Mark part 2, and maybe that other side of us, or that other piece of our soul or our spiritual energy, is Shaltazar sitting on the other side telling us what to do. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's kind of neat. I've listened to or I watched some Star Wars, and I can't quite remember, but I think Darth Vader is somebody inside that tin costume, and I mean, that's an example on the dark side, but on the light side, are we simply the costume for Source, and but we've been given our own operating system that's separate from it. So it's kind of fascinating. There is a message from Shaltazar that basically said it's not one soul per body, and I never went there again, because that one kind of freaked me out. So yeah, I mean, is maybe that's why we resonate so well with each other, Matt. That's why we have so much fun together. That maybe we come from the same soul or soul group, and I just caution that whatever we're talking about is really just hypothetical. And it's really important that people realize that we are not speaking from this authority. We're speaking from conjecture, and that's all we can all have, is just that conjecture.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, all of these messages are thought provoking, and they start you to having dialogue and questioning things, and trying to understand them as they relate to you. But yeah, I'm just making stuff up as I go. Postulating, I guess.
And that's okay, because I think in the message about letting go of your linearity, they talk about the purpose of that message was not clarity, but the purpose was confusion. They came outright and said, we're not here to bring you clarity in this message. We're here to confuse you. And this one's sort of another one of those confusion ones where, how can we get our head around less is more? How can we get our head around, greater access to divinity? How can we get our access around, it's not really us, it's them inside of us? So sometimes they definitely play with us and confuse us. And you and I talked about, before we started recording this, that, we're right now in this energy of being in a muddle. And maybe that muddle is for purpose.
Yeah. Let's say that it is. I mean,
why not?
I'm starting to believe that there's no such thing as an accident or a coincidence it's everything seems to have some sort of plan and purpose behind it these days. So
100%. Fascinating conversation. Thank you, Mark.
Sure. Yeah. I'm sure we're about out of time, but this was a short message packed with stuff. So I encourage anybody who thought this was an interesting conversation to go look it up and read it or listen to it.
Thank you for choosing it. It was a wonderful conversation, and it in a strange way added to my muddledness, but yet there's some rays of clarity coming from it. So excellent choice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, for sure. Love and light to you all.
If you have any questions about the Master Teachings of Shaltazar, we invite you to submit them to Jeffrey at jeffreyeisen.com, and we will make your question the topic of a future episode.